You know, for a watch that's supposed to be understated and minimalistic, it has a really funny charge animation. Hey, it's Joshua Vergara. What's going on, everybody? If you've been waiting for a very good looking and a practical Wear OS smartwatch, well, maybe you have to look no further. This is the Skagen Falster 3. So I did this video a little bit differently. To give you an experience with the Skagen Falster 3, I went ahead and took it with me on a trip without the charger. So why don't we go ahead and rewind the clock. Let me take you to that particular adventure. It is officially 6 a.m. in the morning. You can see it's not even daylight out. The sun isn't even out, and I'm at Long Beach Airport at the moment, as you can hear. Alright, it's time for my review of the Skagen Falster 3. You probably know my stance on smartwatches in general, but this one I have quite a bit of excitement for, mainly because of his minimalistic look and a couple of the features on there that might actually make it last a long time. And by long time, I know that that's relative for a Wear OS watch, but I'm going to get into the battery life in a little bit. Okay, I'm about to board my flight, but one thing about the battery life I can say right now, it's hard to do videos in an airport like this. I did not bring the charger. I'm going to be gone for about 2 days, about a day and a half, 2 days. Let's see if this can actually last my entire trip. It's always interesting flying up with the sunrise. There's a nice gradient right? Here we go with this test for the next 36-ish hours. Let's see if it'll actually keep up. Ooh, it's early. Oh, for me anyway. Alright, finally here in San Francisco. Luckily they had my room for me pretty early. So it is now about 10 a.m. It is 9:45 actually. And I'm at 85% right now. So here's the thing. I'm here for about 36 hours. Like I said before, I did not bring the charger with me because I want to see if the Skagen Falster 3 will actually go the distance, or at least the distance of this trip. One of the cool things about this watch is that there are some power saving modes in here that were put in by Skagen themselves, or by the Fossil group, or by Fossil. It's not really a Wear OS built-in feature. This is something that the manufacturer did. As much as I enjoy those power-saving modes, I have my own little tips and tricks for getting the most out of the smartwatch without having to sacrifice some of the key features that make smartwatches so enticing. The Skagen Falster is basically a minimalistic watch with smart capabilities. The band does try, maybe a little bit too hard, to work with basically any outfit. The reason why is because that brown band that I have on my unit is a leather band, but that's only the top portion of it because the bottom side is all silicone. So of course that means that a watch like this can be used in more workout situations. After all, Google Fit is in the software here, just like with most Wear OS watches, and that silicone on the bottom is not going to get damaged by any sweat that you get on the band because of your workouts. Admittedly though, the watch doesn't really fit in at the gym, at least in my opinion. The watch is minimalistic, which means it doesn't stand out like a sore thumb, thankfully, but every time I look down at the watch to check my time or to check my notifications or anything like that, it just didn't really seem to go well with my sweat-wicking shirt. But the watch body is rated for sweat resistance and has an IP rating, so it is able to withstand those situations. Now the watch body is not too big and also not too thick, which makes it perfect for somebody like myself. It is able to blend in with a lot of other outfits outside of the gym situation, of course, like I mentioned, and there are a few buttons over on the side, with the middle one also working double time as a rotating dial. It's honestly something that I feel like should be on every single smartwatch. The screen is gorgeous, by the way, and it might be one of the best looking ones I've ever seen on a Wear OS smartwatch. It responds very well to the rotating dial, and everything is nice and crisp on here, meaning that when you're actually reading things like messages and emails, it's really easy on the eyes. Overall, the look of the Skagen Falster 3 is an immediate highlight for this Wear OS smartwatch. Say what you will about Wear OS in particular, the fact that Skagen does its best to make the outside as clean and as simple as possible makes you kind of overlook the fact that once you dive into the operating system, things can get a little bit muddled, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Yeah, just a nice stroll to get some coffee to start off the day. My meeting is not until a little bit later today though, so, it's a nice 15-minute walk. Oh man, that place was dope. It was a real hole in the wall. Alright, so let's get underneath that screen and talk about some of the specifications. One of the main things that Skagen and indeed the Falso group ended up doing with these smartwatches is not only outfit it with the Snapdragon Wear 3100, but also give it 1GB of RAM. That's probably one of the reasons why I find it to be a very smooth operating system, because it's not trying too hard to keep running things in the background, and there's not a whole lot to say about Wear OS because it doesn't really change among all of the different current smartwatches. Even if you get this watch or a Moto 360 or a Falso Sport, you pretty much get the same experience. You go into the Play Store, you find different applications that might be available, or you might end up installing different watch faces. Like for example, on this one, I would love to have the GoldenEye watch face like I had for a previous Wear OS smartwatch. But you know what? The Skagen Falster's built-in watch faces are so elegantly designed that I just stick to one of those. Like I've said with many smartwatches before, I only really use a couple of applications that are built in, and I mainly use these as notification centers. That way I can just look at the notification on here and decide whether or not I want to actually take my phone out. I don't actually respond to the messages using the watch, but you can do other things like take calls on this watch as well, because there is a speaker on top of the microphone, and of course you have the Bluetooth connection. I literally got a call on the watch, hit the green button, and started talking to the person like this. Now, this is something that is not new on smartwatches, but this is the first time I did it, and I have to admit, the Skagen Falster 3 did not do too badly. Of course, talking to your wrist like this is probably not all that natural, and it's not something that you would probably do very often, but it's nice to have the option. There was one other thing that I did on this watch that I haven't done on any Wear OS smartwatch, and that was use Google Fit for tracking a workout. This was a bit of a pleasant surprise, to be honest. I know that what I'm about to talk about is available on other smartwatches, but I have to say, the Skagen Falster 3, despite not really fitting in a gym environment, still did pretty well. So you just hit Fit Workout, hit Start, and it will try to detect your movements based upon the sensors in the watch. Now, it can give you up to 3 top guesses, and I was kind of surprised that it was pretty spot on. A couple of cool things are that when you're done with your set, it will give you a 90-second timer or something customizable if you want a longer rest. That way you know to get back to work. You can also log how much weight you actually lifted, and then finally it detects how many reps you did. So there were some times where I lost count of how many reps I was doing just because I was focusing on the lift, and then when I looked at the watch, I found out I did either one less or one too many. Overall, this is an example of how Wear OS does have a lot of capabilities, but it comes back to all of the same questions when it comes to smart watches. Does it do what you need it to do, or does it do way too much? Generally, for most users, Wear OS does way too much, and it ends up being a little bit of a sunk cost because there's so many things in the watch that you might not even touch. So if you don't really want to work with all of those applications, you don't have to. You can still just use this watch as a very effective notification center with occasional work done on Google Assistant or things like a timer for steeping tea, like I always do. But of course, an operating system that tries to be all things to all people might have lackluster battery life, and that's been a problem for Wear OS watches for a long time. Skagen tries to address this by having power-saving modes that are well thought out and actually do help. You could stick to the daily power mode, which basically has all of the features on, and it expects you to charge it every single night. If you go to extended, it says that it can turn on essential features only when you need them, and this should be able to let you charge every few days. It is an effective mode, and I plan on using it later if the watch with my settings doesn't go as long as I want it to. But my one problem with the extended mode is that it also turns off the always on display. It's for that reason that for most smartwatches I tend to do the following. I turn off all of the sensors, that way the watch does not turn on unless I hit the button on the side, and I try to turn off other features that are non-essential, like for example location, I turn it to on demand, and I also turn off the Wi-Fi. So that way I always have a watch face on, that way I can always check the time, and then when I actually want to interact with the watch, I hit the button on the side and start doing everything I want. Okay, so this entire segment where I'm just sort of sitting here in my hotel room, this was all done at around noontime, a couple of hours after my last check-in segment, and I'm down to 76%. I'm hoping that by the end of today, before I go to bed, I'm not anywhere lower than maybe 50%, maybe 45%. And I think that should still get me that extra half day that I really need in order to get back home without this watch dying on me completely. But as I mentioned, I could always move over to the extended battery saving mode if I do feel like the watch under my settings is not going to make the full trip. Alright, so clearly I'm at the airport now, but I did want to give a quick update before I finish up this trip about how the battery life has been going. Last night, as I predicted, right before I went to bed, it did get down to 45% battery life, which meant that I changed it up to the extended power mode, that way I could still have some battery life for today. But you know what, as I'm sitting in the airport right now at 2:45, just waiting for my flight, that is about a day and a half worth of battery life that I was able to get by using those particular modes. I think that I would have been able to make it all the way till now, but I am at 10% now using a combination of my settings and the extended power mode. I guess the main takeaway here is that you have these different power modes so that you can get the most out of the Skagen Falster 3. There is one more mode, however, that I'm going to start using right now, and that is time only. Basically, as I'm hitting single-digit battery life, I'm going to go ahead and go to a time-only mode where all I'm going to be able to do on this watch is tell the time. And with all of that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and get back home, and I will finish this thing up once I'm back in Los Angeles. If all you're looking for is a smartwatch that has a couple of apps that you might use, and you definitely want to look at your notifications without taking your phone out, then this particular experiment that I did is a perfect example of how to achieve that. If you want to do more with this watch, like in particular sleep tracking, which is something I like to do with wearables, Sleep as Android is a great application that integrates really well with Wear OS. Well, you're going to have to charge this watch more often, maybe for about 10 to 15 minutes in the middle of the day before bed. That way you have at least that 20 to 30% that you might require in order to sleep track and wake yourself up with that alarm in the morning. If you really want a Wear OS smartwatch, something that integrates beautifully with your Android smartphone, then the Skagen Falster 3 might be one of the easiest entry points into this world. And at $295, it is asking you to pay a decent amount for a watch that you can't use more than maybe a day and a half or 2 or 3 days at the most, depending on what power settings you choose. But as long as you can get over that hurdle, I think that you have one of the most elegant versions of Wear OS that is available now. And you know what? I'm a smartwatch skeptic. I would prefer to have something with longer battery life, and I don't need all of the functions that are in typical Wear OS watches. But you know what? I'm actually pretty happy to have this one on my wrist, even if it has to come off that wrist more often than I would like. So I'm going to call it on this one. Thank you so much for watching. Get into the comment sections down below. Let me know what you think about the Skagen Falster 3, especially if you got one for yourself. That way you can tell us what your experience has been like. And then you can drop some likes on this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Consider hitting the bell over on the side because I've noticed some users telling me that they did not see my videos in the feed. So you definitely want to hit that bell if you want to keep up with everything that I'm doing. But again, thank you so much for watching. And until my next video, I will just remind you to enjoy your tea, everybody.